Hello, I'm Dr. Diana Hardy, and welcome to Red Wine Magazine. We're here today at the prestigious Plaza Club, and I am so blessed today to have with me a new and upcoming author of a book that I think is just great. It's no secret. It's a Christian guide to the law of attraction. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Watson.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you for coming. Dr. Watson, I really there's so many questions I have for you this evening, but I think I want to take my time with this. This book is a book that I think that is going to really change the face of Christianity as we know it today. I think it's a long overdue book. Why? Why the law of attraction?
Well, Diana, I'm sure you're aware of the book and the movie that came out in 2006 called The Secret.
Mm-hmm.
The information presented in that book I agreed with, but I didn't agree with the way it was presented.
Okay.
Because it left God out of the picture. The biggest part of that was wrong to me in that part of it was it basically made it look like God was just a genie in a bottle. And from a Christian perspective, I don't believe that at all. I do believe that we can have basically anything we want with one small stipulation.
Okay.
And that is that we need to want what God wants to give us. If we're in tune to God and we're listening to God and what He has to say, then we're going to want the things that He wants to give us.
Okay. So you're saying that basically it's what God wants us to have, and it's not so much our thoughts if they're different than the thoughts or
Right.
the things that God wants us to have.
You know, God's going to have a different plan for you than He does for me.
Absolutely.
And so we're all individuals and we're all spiritual beings, and so that is a key part of it. I appreciate the people who have written about the law of attraction before, but my book comes from a spiritual side of it, a very Christian side of it, and not from a humanistic side.
Well, thank God that this book is here. I think that it's going to be a real big blessing. How has this law and this principle operated in your life?
Oh, that would take forever. Too many things. I'll briefly say one of the same things that's in the book. In 2005, during the courtship to my wife, Margie, we had a picnic one day on the Guadalupe River, just north of here. And on the side of the river that day, I shared with her 5 goals that I had for life. And I told her, I said, I don't know where God's going to lead me after this, but this is what I have in mind for right now. And I was basically struggling. I had lost a profession, starting a new job or new career, was still working for someone else while doing so. And I laid out 5 goals. The first of those goals was to complete and build my own business as a furniture craftsman building log furniture. At the same time, I was trying to build a new home. I had recently went through a divorce and struggling in that regards. And so I was trying to build a new home in what used to be a poultry barn there on my property. So those two were kind of simultaneous. The third goal was I needed a 4-wheel drive pickup for my business for what I wanted to do with the furniture making, to acquire the logs to go get stuff, and I wanted a Dodge diesel pickup. The fifth was I wanted to build a grass runway, dirt airstrip on our ranch, and I wanted to someday own a plane and learn to fly. And the last goal, I'm sorry, there was 2. Okay. The last goal was I wanted a piece of property in New Mexico. Now that was in 2005, early in 2005. By 2010, 4.5 of those goals have come to pass.
Wow.
The only one that didn't happen was, and I still haven't bought a plane yet, but I have put in the runway, and I'm learning how to fly off my own grass strip. We have 2 pieces of property in New Mexico. One has a little cabin on it. It's a beautiful, quiet place to go listen to God, be still and listen to God. And I could go on and on. There have been many numerous blessings, and I'm not talking about, and in my book, I don't talk about just the material things that the law of attraction can provide for you. The biggest blessing is just knowing God.
Well, that sounds pretty impressive, Dr. Watson. It sounds like, it reminds me of the scripture, write the vision and make it plain. And it's obviously very plain in your mind, so much so that you're here and you're recalling, you can recount exactly the 5 goals that you had. I think it's wonderful. Too many Christians don't have that in their mind clear like that. And it's very clear and concise for you.
Can I add something to that?
Sure,
real quick?
go ahead, say what you want.
At the end 2010, I was struggling. And while I was struggling with this, I was seeing that, there had been a tremendous amount of growth and we had progressed and we were gaining things. But also, I was one day kind of feeling sorry for myself and praying, God, why is this so hard this year? Because that was a hard year. And I struggled with it. And God answered, you didn't put up a new target.
Wow.
So those goals had come to pass, but I hadn't reset the bar. And so you've got to set a new target. I just wanted to share that.
Well, that's very interesting, and I'm very glad that you said that, because that is why a lot of people haven't realized their blessings, because they have not set a new target. They've gotten so far and they haven't gone further, and there are things that they should be thinking about in their mind, new targets, as you just said to us.
Kind of plateau.
Yeah, and I noticed that you have a Doctorate of Divinity here. How did that come about? When did you get it?
Well, the Doctor of Divinity degree, it's an honorary degree.
Okay.
But the reason for that was about 5 or 6 years ago, my mother, studying our family genealogy, informed me that my 11th great-grandfather was named William Whitaker. He was born in the early 1500s in England, and he ended up being professor of divinity at Cambridge University. And was the master of St. John's College there, which is Cambridge University. He wrote a book in 1588 that's still being used in seminaries today. And that, to me, just kind of rocked me of the heritage that I had.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about how neat it would be to maybe try to receive an honorary degree just as a tribute to him. And so I kind of researched that a little bit, and I ended up having to write a dissertation, and the place that I went through allowed me to use my life history and experience as part of that, and to write a dissertation about what God has done in my life. And I received that degree in April of last year of 2012.
That's great. Sounds like writing is in your blood then, obviously.
It was a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a struggle that you overcame, and you broke through and was able to write this book. I had the pleasure of reading this book, and although I didn't get all the way through, now I'm going to, since I have this physical copy, I was pretty impressed with just the 50 pages that I read, and it's not easy to impress me. So I think you really got something here, and
Thank you.
I really want to encourage the people today to go out and get this book. It's no secret, The Christian Guide to God's Law of Attraction. I also, in reading about you on the website, I realized that you're also a life coach. Now, I know life coaches are, this is in this 21st century, that's pretty prominent right now. What is your niche?
Well, yes, life coaching it's moved forward quite a bit. And my niche is life balance, and teaching what I call God's law of attraction, not just the law of attraction, but what does God want to do?
Right.
What does God want for you? And the way I came into the life coaching was I was always the one that family and friends tended to come to when they needed someone to talk to. And that, along with speaking in general, is kind of one of those things to where Jesus taught the law of the talents.
Right.
And in that parable, he's talking about talent. That was a physical coin. But I truly believe that we can take that to mean our talents that God gives us, the skills that he gives us. And that was one of those things that I felt that God was calling me to do more, to try to help more people, that he has blessed me with a lot. I've overcame a lot, and I felt like that I could help people with that. So that's why I got into the coaching aspect of it. I received my coaching certificate in May of last year, and I took the course. I'd been doing some work online and then had to go to Houston for 3 days to study and prepare for it. And when I took that, I knew I wasn't going to use it last year at all. The work schedule that I had and everything wasn't going to allow that, but it was a stepping stone. I had the time right then to take it and the finances, so I did that. The beginning of this year, on a limited basis, I started taking on coaching clients, but as I was writing the book also, that was very limited. Now that the book is published and out, I am opening up for more clients.
Okay, so you have sounds like you have a pretty solid foundation. So I'm pretty sure you'll be using this book to in your life coaching.
There's a lot of what I've learned from the coaching that and just the knowledge in the book, yes, that will be used in coaching. I encourage people to read the book.
What's your ideal client like?
My ideal client would be this is funny, but a frustrated Christian. Anyone who is not happy with their spiritual walk, their health, their finances, their relationships in general. On my website and my blog, I talk about the 4 balance points of your spiritual health, your physical health, your relationships, and your finances. Okay. If any one of those 4 get out of balance, then it throws your whole life out of balance. Okay. And I talk about those. Now, in coaching, there's a tool called a life wheel. And when I was taking my training, they were showing these life wheels, and a life wheel was basically like a piece of pie, a pie sliced into 4 quarters. And they had the spiritual side as one slice of the pie. I explained to my instructors that was a flawed design. I said, this is a flawed design. He says, what do you mean? And I said, well, have you ever had a bubble on your car tire? He said, yeah. I said, and the car shook and wobbled, and eventually the tire blew out. He said, and I said, so you're looking at, God created us as a spiritual being. We're first and foremost a spiritual being. So if we don't have our spirit being centered, then we're just like that bubble on a tire. We're already out of balance.
Yeah.
We have to have the spirit centered first.
Yeah, I agree.
In order to energize and strengthen and flow for everything else. So my life wheel, and there's a design in the book that I drew, has a center hub, and that's your spiritual center, and then everything else radiates out from that center hub. And that's a term that I call centering the core.
Sounds like you might have to add to your business coaching, because you was able to share that principle with him. Pretty sure he probably thought a lot about that. That's pretty good. When I was looking at your website, I saw some of the beautiful woodwork that you do, the different types of things that you have built, and it's obvious that you're a gifted woodworker and craftsman. What is the name of your business?
My woodworking business is called Rustic Art Gallery. It's rusticartgallery.com. If anybody wants to look it up online. Okay. And woodworking is an interesting profession. Jesus was also a woodworker. I don't know if he would be jealous of my cordless drills and all of that type of stuff. I'm sure he was probably very, very gifted too. That's one of the neat things about woodworking, though, is it allows me to also spend a lot of time, because I don't just go to the lumber yard to get my materials. My lumber yard is the forest. I go out in the woods and I harvest the native trees, the raw wood right off of the forest floor, or the dead trees that I find. And that's one of the neat things you asked a while ago about some of the way the law of attraction had worked in my life. Is in 5 years ago, we purchased a piece of property off eBay in New Mexico. That was the first piece of property that we bought, and I bought it off eBay sight unseen. Now, I did have an arrangement with the gentleman that if I was up there within 30 days, he would give me choice of 3 lots, not just the one I bid on. So I made arrangements to go up there. I took my son and 2 of my grandsons, and we go to New Mexico. We're up there, and we find the lot that I bid on. We decide to camp. We're looking at the other 2. I did choose one of the other lots. But the second night we're there, we're sitting around after we'd had our evening meal. We're sitting around the campfire, and it's about this same time of day, sun's setting, and I look up, and right behind my son there's an alligator juniper tree. Well, my woodworking business, I had 2 clients that wanted alligator juniper mantles, and it's not available in Texas. So we looked around, and the upshot of it was we brought home enough wood, dead wood that was already down, already dead, off of that little piece of property that I bought on the very first trip there to half pay for it.
Wow.
It has now been paid for, and I've sold enough wood off of it today to 3/4 pay the cost of it, and I have several more pieces. As soon as I sell one of those, it'll be completely paid for off of the wood that came off of it.
Wow.
That's one of the neat things about the way God's law of attraction works.
Well, obviously you're applying these principles to your life. I've heard a number of different things here. You're a book writer, and you obviously go out in the forest and get your wood. How impressive is that? How long have you had this business?
Well, that started in the mid-'90s, but at that time it was still more of a hobby than a business. Now, in 1999, the company, I mentioned earlier that I used to raise turkeys.
Right.
The company in Fredericksburg, Texas, that had the contract that we were growing turkeys for, in 99 they had a fire at that processing facility. Well, they decided to rebuild out of state, and that effectively put us out of business. So I turned my poultry barn into a wood shop, and that's when I went full time. Previous to that, I was just working out of our garage a little bit on the other stuff. But the problem with that was I still didn't know what I was doing. That was a hobby. I was learning, but I didn't know enough about it.
Right.
And shortly after that, a job opened up at a wood shop in Blanco, and I went to work for that gentleman. He knew I was trying to build a business, and he allowed me a little bit of leeway when I had jobs that I needed to go. But he taught me a lot, and I left on good terms when I did leave. I worked there almost 4 years, and without the knowledge that I gained there, I would not have been successful. But it has been really, really interesting to be able to take nature's throw-offs, the dead wood that you find in the forest, and turn that into a usable piece of furniture that I like to call it heirloom furniture. I don't really care for the legal profession as lawyers per se, but I like to tell my customers that their great-grandparents or great-grandkids are going to have to hire a lawyer because they're going to be fighting over the furniture I built.
Sounds like it. You know, before I ask you my next question, I've got to ask you this. How do you tell the difference between the alligator juniper and just the juniper tree?
Well,
or is there any?
There's a big difference.
Okay.
What we have here in Central Texas is called ash juniper.
Okay.
And in New Mexico, they call them shaggy bark because the bark is real shaggy and it hangs. They're out there also. But the alligator juniper tree has needles very similar to the ash juniper, which is around here. It has a bigger blue berry, which the bears love. It's really interesting. They come around and eat all the berries. And every time we go camp on that particular piece of property, we find bear poop all around the property there. But the bark looks like an alligator skin. And so that's how you can tell an alligator juniper. And as I said, that was something that I had clients that wanted that type of wood, but before we went out there and bought that piece of property, I didn't have a source for it. So that was really neat how God worked in that regard. When I bought the property, that was the last thing on my mind. I had no idea alligator wood juniper was there. All I was buying that for was to have a place to go camp to escape the summer heat here for a week or two when it got hot.
I would love to see that one day, the alligator juniper.
It is a beautiful wood. It's a pleasure to work with, too. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds like. So you live on a ranch?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
My great-grandfather started the little town of Hye, spelled H-Y-E, in 1880. And that's about a half mile from our ranch where we live. He started there in 1880. The post office came in 1886, and it's still a post office. It's still where we go to get our mail, and the little old boxes are still there up in the wall in the corner of the building. The building is now I don't like to say that, it's high spirits or high market. That area is growing up with wineries. We have wineries. The only organic Texas whiskey distillery is just a mile from us, and all of that right there. And so it's a spirits story, but it's an upscale one. He's done a really good job with it, and I'd much rather see that than see the building boarded up and closed.
Right, absolutely.
So it's been interesting.
So you grew up on the ranch?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I have a question. I know after listening to all of this that you just said, that other people are probably pondering, what drives your passion? Where does your passion lie? What drives you?
Well, that's something that changes through life as you go on. Right now, I would have to say that what I'm most passionate about is I believe that with this book that God has given me a message to share, and I'm doing my best to try to share that. So my passion right now is to try to get this book and this message in front of as many people as possible.
Okay.
I truly believe that God called me to write this. I've watched Him open doors before I even knew I was coming up to a wall this year. Just the way things have fell into place. I know it was His will and what He wanted for me to do. So at this point, that was what I'd have to say it is. Just trying to be the best me that I can be also.
Sounds like you're doing a good job of that.
I'm trying.
Yeah. What do you do to draw closer to God? I hear you talking, you obviously have a very strong relationship with God. What do you do to draw closer to Him?
Diana, that's something that I believe in today's society, that's something that everybody needs to try to do. And in the fast-paced world that we live in, we're all running 90 miles an hour all the time. It's just rush, and there's noise.
Right.
And what has been one of the biggest blessings for me is just learning how to tune out the noise and find a quiet spot and just listen, just to be quiet, to just find a quiet spot. Now, of course, being in His Word daily is imperative. Praying and talking to Him. That's the biggest part of it right there, is just being able to be quiet. And I mentioned the piece of property in New Mexico that had the alligator juniper trees on it. The other piece of property that God has blessed us with is further west. It's real close to Arizona border, and it has a little cabin on it. And that particular piece of property has been such a blessing to us because it's so quiet out there you can hear the stars singing to each other.
Is that the picture that you showed me of the?
Yes, it is.
The place
Yes,
you built?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is.
Was that a house?
That's a little cabin.
It's a little
just
cabin.
a little bitty cabin. It's nothing fancy yet. It's just a little cabin, but it's so quiet and it's so peaceful.
Wow.
The first time I took my grandson Josh out there, the very first time I was ever out there myself, I took him and we rolled in about midnight. We unlocked the doors. We go in and we crash. As soon as the lights went out, I said, "Josh, do you hear that?" He said, "I don't hear anything, Grandpa." I said, "That's my point. You don't hear anything. It's just quiet."
That's really nice. I'm sure he won't forget that when he gets older.
He's been up there 3 more times since.
Wow.
So
That's nice. What advice do you have today that you can offer people?
that would be going back over the last few questions.
Okay.
Being in His Word daily.
Being in His Word.
Praying and listening. Finding that quiet spot.
Right.
Finding that quiet spot that you can just be alone with God and just listen. God wants to hear from us.
Absolutely.
But there's another side of that is in conversation, just like we're having today. You're asking questions and I'm answering.
That's right.
It's a two-way street.
Right. We're dialoguing. Yeah.
There's a two-way street there, and it's called communication.
Communicating.
Most of the times nowadays, when people are praying to God, they're not praying to God. They're praying, but all they're doing is talking.
Right.
They're not listening. Praying is talking to God. Meditating is listening to God. And that is what I would say is one of the best pieces of advice that I can give somebody today.
I think you shared a lot of vital information today that somebody could, even just in what you shared in this time that we've been sitting here, they can take that and apply it to their life and could begin to open up some opportunities for them that they've not had. Are you available for seminars and conferences?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, I was called today to speak next April for a Baptist church in East Texas. I have some other bookings for other churches in early January and February, but I wasn't booked in anything that far out yet, so I told them yes. And absolutely, that's what I'm hoping and striving to do, is to spread this message and from that aspect of it. So thank you.
I see that you have an article in the Law of Attraction. What's this article in here about?
Well, that one is a lot about my life story, and there was a question in there about the way I started it is because I used to raise turkeys.
Huh.
The title of the article is Turkey Wisdom, and I started it with, it's hard to soar with eagles when you work with turkeys. And I used to raise turkeys on a commercial basis. I was raising 120,000 turkeys a year, going through about 5 million pounds of feed a year. So it was a sizable operation, and it was an interesting deal. But I in that article, I basically tie in about how working with the turkeys, I learned that was not my calling, and God took that away from me through that fire, via that fire. And at the time, it was hard to see the reasoning and the why, but I was not happy in that profession at all. And God took it away from me in order to open up these other doors for me. And without Him taking it away, I probably would have just stayed there and not looked up at the sky like the turkeys that I talk about in the article.
Well, you hear the old folks say, when one door closes, another one opens. And, that a lot of people need to get that if the door does, just like you said, if it doesn't close, people will continue to struggle and stay and remain unhappy in their current situation. But when doors close, then they're forced to look somewhere else, which is pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
In one of the speeches that I do, there's sermons, whatever you want to call it, there's a term that I use. The title of that one is called Weeds in the Garden.
Right.
And that particular message starts out as a morning prayer. And I basically started out as a morning prayer of, Lord, thank you for that good night's sleep. Thank you for what looks like a beautiful day out the window. And Lord, thank you for your many blessings. Lord, I'm going to get my shower now, but I'd love to visit with you and some more after my shower. I'll see you in the garden. And then it goes, when it picks back up, there's an exclamation of, Lord, where did these weeds come from? I planted weed-free seed. Where did these weeds come from? Our lives are our garden. Our minds are the soil. Our thoughts and our words are the seeds that we plant. And we may think we're planting weed-free seed, but we all are still planting weeds every day. We don't mean to,
right,
but we do. The point to that message in that whole message is to really grasp what seeds are we planting. And it's an interesting deal. There's two gentlemen that I know. I think I've shared this with you before. Both of them are about 5 years apart in age, and the older one, his father is fairly wealthy. He's passed on now. The younger one I asked him one time, I said something, I said, how many times did you hear growing up, did you hear your dad say, are you crazy? You think money grows on trees? Mm-hmm. And he just laughed and he said, I'd be wealthy if I had $1 for every time I heard that. So consequently, that man's life is, he's in his mid-40s now, but he's been taught all his life that he can't really have anything. Mm-hmm. And he's a hard worker and he loves his family. He's a great man. This other man, on the other hand, when I asked him, I said, what did your dad do if you wanted something that he didn't want to spend that much money for? Right. Now, I was asking him and his brother at the same time, and they both looked at me and they said, Patrick, they said, Dad would just put his arm around our shoulder and he'd just say, son, go find a money tree. Both of those gentlemen have $1 million homes. Very, very fancy cars, drives. They're both very generous gentlemen too, by the way. Right. They didn't forget where they came from or what they have, and they don't take those blessings for granted. Mm-hmm. My point to it was, though, is they didn't grow up being told you can't have it.
Right.
So there's a message there into parents. Don't tell your children you can't have something. Right. You know, if you can't afford it, but don't tell them they can't have it. Right. Because it affects the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Very good point. I know that we're in this society that we live in. We're trained to say if we don't have it, or if we think that somebody's never going to get it, that we say those kind of things. And right. Words carry a lot of power. God's word says the power of life and death is in the tongue, and we kind of got to pay a lot of attention to that.
Yes.
And be careful what we say.
Very, very important.
Very important. Very important. I'm glad that you wrote this book because it really was needed. I'm sure you, as you stated earlier, you touched on something about the book. The Secret. Was it The Secret?
The Secret, yes.
I didn't really read it. I looked at it a little bit, and then people said that it wasn't right. But I'm glad that you're showing people that the law of attraction is God's law, just like the law of gravity.
It is.
Yeah.
It truly is. Mm-hmm. If from a Christian perspective,
mm-hmm.
if we believe that God created the world, the universe, and everything in it,
right.
He also created those universal laws that govern it.
Right.
And we can look in society, and it's not hard to look at people who may be successful financially but are not living a Christian lifestyle. And I'm not trying to judge, and I'm not saying any names.
Right.
But they may be very, very successful financially.
Mm-hmm.
And when you research and look into their lives, it's because they're applying principles that God has put in His Word. Even though they may not know God or believe God, they may not even know that.
Right.
But they're applying those principles.
In your life.
The Word says that it rains on the just and the unjust alike.
That's right.
So, as you said, the law of gravity, you don't hear Christians arguing about, well, the law of gravity doesn't apply to us. I haven't heard of anybody going to the Grand Canyon and jumping off because they wanted to hit the bottom. They don't do that. But yet, when I tried to share the movie The Secret with other Christian friends and family, I kept getting the cold shoulder. We're not supposed to do that. And then the other clincher, one of the things is I came in that very Law of Attraction magazine, not that issue, but another one. There was an article last year that talked about one of the audience members on one of Oprah's shows.
Right.
And they were talking about the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. And this woman stood up when they opened it to questions, and she said that her and her husband were Christians. They raised their children with Christian moral values and tried to do their best.
Uh-huh.
And she did not understand where God fit in with the law of attraction. To the best of my knowledge, that question has not been properly answered until my book.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would agree with you.
I hope that lady will find a copy of this.
I do too. I would agree with you. Well, Dr. Watson, it's been a pleasure today talking about It's No Secret. I really want to encourage all of you, all of your Red Wine magazine readers and everybody, please go out and get this book. Where can you get this book from?
You can get the book at exlibris.com, amazon.com, and barnesandnobles.com.
Okay.
Thank you
Well,
very
thank
much.
you so
It's been
much.
a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Okay.